Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good day to everyone. How are you? How's everyone doing? Just finishing getting set up over here. Good. It's good to hear that. Everybody ready to do a little painting together today? Good morning. Where's everybody joining from today? I'm gonna run out of you're in Oregon? Nice, I'm gonna be right back. I gotta refill my water, I forgot to do that. All right. Hello, hello, Arkansas, British Columbia, Philadelphia, Iowa, south of England, love that. Canada. Well, we are actually right at the time, so I'm going to start some introductions and stuff. My name is Lacey. I'm the artist behind Rebel Unicorn Crafts, and we paint together every other week on live. So I teach a free class, and you guys can follow along if you want. I do usually repost this if TikTok does save it. But today what we're going to be doing, I got a lot of requests the last time for some more floral things, and we were talking about like specific individual flowers, but I didn't have enough time to actually practice and kind of refresh on the individual ones, and I've been having a lot of fun painting these like super duper fast and loose floral bouquets. So I thought it'd be fun to do it together because there are a couple tricks to it. Here in Maine with all the snow. Oh my goodness. Illinois, Belgium, Brooklyn, Wales. Oh, I love seeing where everybody's from. That's so exciting. I'm in Colorado. It's decently nice today, but apparently we might be getting more snow next week. All right, so is everybody ready to get started? I'm going to be using just like a bunch of different, I'm in the process of trying to clean out my studio, and also still kind of unpacking from my trip to see Andrea, and I don't actually know where my current watercolor palettes are. So I've just grabbed, I've got one of my old, this is the previous set of the unicorn food. I've got Koi, I've got Viva, and then I was doing some painting with some tube paints yesterday when I was doing some demonstrating. So I'm going to be using a variety. These don't take that long to paint, so we'll probably do these a couple different times. And I was going to do them on a couple different papers. Hello, hello. All right, so let's talk about a couple things before we get started. I posted this one like last fall, and this is something that I painted in about 5 or 10 minutes. So we're working with really fast, loose type paintings today. You can definitely add more detail, and I'm going to show you a couple things. This is also one in a similar vein with different colors and a slightly different kind of shape to the whole thing. But this is another one I did where, depending on what you like and how much coverage you like, this one you might look at and think either, oh, I like some more of the detail in there, like some of these, but you might also look at this one and think like, ooh, that kind of looks a little overworked, or maybe it's a little too busy. And so one of the main things we're going to be learning today is preserving white space and letting some of those areas kind of speak for themselves and adding in small details. So we'll look through a couple more of these that I did kind of in a similar vein where they're have more or less detail. These are all very kind of abstracted, but this was based on that bouquet I made for my granny a couple weeks ago. Similar thing here. Or even if you wanted to do it without the little vase or something like that. So that's kind of what we're going to be painting today, are these like really loose flowers. You're going to need some watercolor paper. I'm going to start off by doing 2 on this Canson watercolor paper here. And you're going to need some water, obviously, because we are painting with watercolor. I'm going to be using a round brush for all of these. And I'm going to, I think I'm going to start by using these here. The colors you use don't super matter. I'll do the top one with these, and then I'll switch over to Koi for the bottom, and then I'm going to switch over to a different type of paper so that we can see kind of how different things look. Now, every single one of these is going to look a little different just by the nature of kind of what we're doing today, because we're just going to be really, really loose. So I'm going to start by just spritzing a little water in here. I've got a purple, I've got a pink, I do have a brown here. I don't know if I'm going to use that. I've got a green, I've got 2 greens and a yellow. Let's see, let me just make sure that I'm not... Andrea didn't steal my paints. It takes me forever to unpack from things. I don't know why. It's not my thing. All right, so I have my water here, and I'm gonna, gosh, we've got such limited room in these little lives on where I can place these. I guess I gotta put that out of there. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna take a brush, and I'm just gonna swirl it around in some water and get my brush pretty wet. And then for this first one, let me kind of draw out something, because this is going to be a little hard to see. Is you kind of want to pick the general shapes. So just doing a big circle isn't going to be quite as interesting. Like if you look at the ones of these that are more successful, notice that this one is not just one circle. It has some little kind of offshoots, or it has one kind of main part here. Same with this one. It is kind of a circle, but it has some different kind of offshoots into it. So we kind of want to picture this as, you know, so we have our general kind of circle area, but we want to make sure there's kind of like some little like offshoot areas, maybe here and here, just to give it a little more interest. Now, this is just kind of a weird little shape, and normally I don't even kind of draw anything like this, but I just kind of want to have a little visual thing so you guys can kind of see what my goal is for when I'm placing down this water. Let's get that off of there. All right, so starting for real now, got some water in my brush, and I'm going to just tap this around in a couple of these, kind of staying where I've kind of determined that's going to be. Now, if we actually look at this, the best way to kind of keep track of it is to find a reflection. And I've got I do want white space, but I kind of want to bring a couple of these things a little bit more. I've got just really kind of regular type shapes going on. So I'm just going to scribble around a little bit more. All right, so you can see where there is water, and then where it's not shining is where the water is not. And I'm just going to start, so this is core, and this one does kind of push pretty hard. This is a nice pink. I'm just going to drop this in 3 or 4 places. Maybe more. Oh, I think I want a couple more. All right. And in some of these areas, it's going to touch the water. In other areas, it's not, and that's totally fine. This is one of those things where it's kind of a trust the process, but mainly what it is just kind of don't overthink this too much, which I know is one of the hardest things to do in watercolor. All right, I'm going to come in with, this one is a Daniel Smith. I think this is quinacridone purple. So it has some kind of pink undertones to it. And I'm going to do the same thing where I'm just going to touch in a couple spots. In some areas, it's going to touch that water. In other areas, it's not. And maybe I didn't put quite enough water. I think I talked a little bit too much. But, you know, we're going to kind of fill this in as we go. These are all adaptable. I'm going to grab a little of this yellow because I just want something that's a little bit brighter to kind of pop in here in a couple places. And as a matter of fact, maybe I'm actually going to kind of pop it up over here to make kind of a real kind of interest point. And then just pop it in a couple little places. So this does not look like much of anything right now, right? So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of chill out, eat a moon pie, and wait for a second as this kind of like does its thing a little bit. This is Canson XL paper. And just as a reminder for those who are joining, we are doing super duper loose watercolor bouquets. Ones where we're just kind of like tapping our brush around. Now, you can, if you are careful, you can come in and start adding in some of the greenery details, because the greenery is honestly what kind of brings this whole thing together and brings the narrative around, like, oh, that's a bloom there, it's connected to a stem. Oh, there are some like little leaves and things over here. Some of the greenery that fills it is really kind of what helps us create like the illusion of this being a bouquet. You've got a 7-Up, and some of these is when we're doing this. Some of them are going to be more realistic than others. So, for example, what we want to practice while we're kind of waiting and chilling out is practicing tapping our brush in a way where we're going to kind of be able to allude to some of these different types of leaf shapes that are more realistic. They're not super realistic. So I'm going to move this over so that we can kind of practice in this space over here. And I'm going to grab just some green in my brush here. And when I make those little kind of leaf things, in some areas I'm just going to take the tip of my brush and kind of drag and to create kind of leaf shapes. But the other thing I might do is if I wanted to make like, not really eucalyptus, but you know there are some of those greenery fillers where it's like an offshoot, 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 offshoot. That's where I would kind of tap like this, 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 this. And something like that is going to kind of create like the illusion of that little bit of greenery kind of poking up. You can also just kind of tap in one area if you wanted to kind of show that there were lots of little kind of leaves. So keep in mind that our little brush and just some of these little things, depending on what you're trying to allude to, can really change how it's going to look. You know, you could also do much kind of thinner type leaves, just depending on what you want to do. So I'm going to come in here on this one, and I'm going to grab some of this green in my brush, and I'm going to start to kind of decide where these are all going to kind of connect into this pot. So I'm going to start to just take the tip of my brush, and we're just going to put in a couple. I actually need a little bit more green in my brush because I don't have this very saturated. But I'm just going to kind of start to, oop, that one was really wet, that's fine. So was that one. So you can sometimes just wait, but I'm just going to kind of add in a couple little details here. Over here I might even start to kind of tap to make that look like maybe one of those flowers that has a lot of different things kind of going on where it shoots up. This would also look a lot better without the pencil marks behind it, but just to kind of illustrate what I'm doing. And I do need a little bit more of this darker green, otherwise this is not going to have enough contrast, so I'm going to put a little more here. And I'm just going to mix that in so it's a little darker. I also kind of feel like maybe I should balance it out with a little bit of this brown, just to kind of, because this is a viridian, so it's really kind of a blue color. So if I wanted to kind of mute that a little bit, I'm just going to add a little brown in there. I'm just kind of, I start by adding in these stems just a little bit to kind of just introduce the idea that everything is kind of going in those directions. Now I'm going to actually start by doing some of those taps that we talked about. So maybe up here, maybe that's where we have one of those ones that's like the offshoot type that comes up. Maybe we have a little hint to it over there too. Maybe I'll switch over to a different green because all flowers have kind of different type greenery, and so maybe we just have like a long one over here. Maybe we've got another long one over here, and then there usually are a couple that kind of fall over wherever that vase is, so I'm going to kind of hint to some of those over here. Kind of all bringing it to the center. Now if at this point, there's a couple things that are happening. Once I add the vase, this will kind of all come together. But if we wanted to mess with this a little bit, because for example, a lot of that green went into that pink and I really liked that one, and it was not quite dry enough, I'm going to tap my brush off so it's dry, and I'm just going to pick up some of that pigment so that it's not so much in there. just if I want to kind of control a couple little areas. I can also come in, bring a little bit more if I wanted to kind of emphasize the middle of this. And at this point, while things are still kind of wet, if you want to emphasize any of these colors, we can do that. So maybe I want to just kind of drop in a couple little petal type shapes here. We're going to do this a couple different times, so these are all going to kind of work to different levels. But if I just wanted a little more brightness, I can absolutely do that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to even add in a little yellow here. I want you to listen to your painting. If your painting is telling you you need something more, listen to it. If your painting is telling you, ooh, you're getting close to really just kind of overworking this, maybe take a step back. This is when the moon pie is going to come into account. I feel like I need a little more darker greenery kind of over here to kind of balance. So I might add in a couple little more here, and maybe one here, and maybe even one more there. And drop in a little extra just so that it's a little more saturated. Okay, at this point, I am worried I am going to start to really overwork this. I already have in some areas. This is my moon pie time. So if you need to, this is your moon pie time too. Now we can either move on to doing the vase on this. The vases are pretty simple on these, but I'm going to let you guys vote. I'm going to take a second to actually look at the comments, see if anybody has questions specifically. But I want to paint one down here too. So we're going to do this again, and it won't look exactly the same, and that's totally fine. But we're going to do it again. So you guys can either choose, do you want me to finish off this one with the vase, or do you want me to work on the flowers down here, and then we'll come back to the vase while this one is kind of chilling out, because if we do the vase, we can potentially put the vase color into this, which is a little risky, but we can also do it. So I'm going to check in the comments and let's see. All right. I really kind of lost a lot of this stuff. Let's see. Yeah, the green does most of the work in this painting. It's kind of funny. I've got two different greens. I have a green gold and then I have a viridian, and I kind of mixed them together. What's a moon pie? So it's that sound on TikTok for anybody who's unfamiliar, that just chill out. Have a moon pie. Stop murdering people. I want to see a round vase when I do. Okay, so vase now, flowers, flowers, vase, finish vase. Okay, so I think vase has won the options. All right, we're gonna get a little extra lesson here. So one of the things I was doing yesterday when I was actually filming how to use the tube paints, and so I just grabbed a bunch of random colors, and these were the colors that I grabbed. And so I was like, okay, well, let's work with a limited color palette. So we're going to actually get a little additional lesson on if you were working with a limited color palette. Let's try to make it kind of a gray color. And you're thinking, okay, you don't have gray. How are we going to get there? Let's try to actually make a gray together. I'm going to set this kind of here so that we can get this a little more in frame. I'm going to start with a little water in here, and then I'm going to take some of this purple. So we want to go for opposites here, and the opposite of purple is yellow. So I'm going to grab a little yellow, which is going to kind of bring us into a brown, which is kind of funny because I probably could have just started with that brown instead of doing that. But then I'm going to take, and I need a little more of this because I'm running out. This viridian green color has a lot of blues in it. So if we add some of this color, it's going to counteract a lot of the reds, but it's also going to kind of add some blue tones to this because this is a pretty blue color. I went a little too far, so I'm going to add in a little more of this purple. See how we're getting real close to kind of a gray color? Mixing colors together. There we go. I've got kind of a gray. So all it is balancing the opposites. So this is the best if you're going to learn one single thing about color theory, figure out opposites or complements, because when you're trying to mix neutral colors like gray or black or different browns, it's all about just counteracting different colors that you see in the color by using their complementary color to get to a gray. Okay. All right, so we're doing the vase, and I think I'm going to try to do that kind of rounded one like I showed in this one here. All right, so depending on how you feel about doing this, you might want to take a second and dry this or wait to do this if you're nervous about it. I'm just going to go for it. This does still have some wet areas, so I do need to be careful where I am placing this down. But I'm just going to kind of first start by just kind of sketching in with my brush the general kind of rounded vase shape. Now there's color there. I'm going to wash my brush and tap it so it's just damp. And now I'm just going to kind of touch along those areas. I'm going to kind of avoid the areas that I've painted with other colors. And I'm just going to bring that up into here. And by kind of doing that outline, we're going to create kind of a natural shadow at the bottom of this. Now, if you lost most of your shadow, you can pick up a lot of this water with your brush and then grab some more of that color and then just literally tap it along the base to kind of reinforce that shadow if you need to. You can always kind of tap it a little bit to kind of influence it to move a little bit as you want it. So that's in general the vase shape that I'm going to be going for. Again, this is a really, really, really loose painting where we're just letting the eye decide what this is. Like when you look at each individual part of this, if I were to look at right here, you're like, what is that? But when we kind of bring it all together, that's when we start to see this. So I use all sorts of watercolors. Right now I'm using, this is a combination of Core, Shin Han, and Daniel Smith. For the next one we're going to do, I'm going to switch over to Koi, and then we're going to do one more where I might use my old Unicorn Food palette. So we have a variety of different things. And this is a pretty limited color palette, but on the Koi one, we're not going to have as many limits, so we can do a lot more. Now, I'm just kind of chit-chatting right now. I'm going to go back into the comments because I want to wait for this to dry a little bit more before I start to add in the shadow, because that's another thing that's going to kind of help us place this in kind of space to help us kind of really get an idea that this is a vase sitting on something. The vase was, no, the vase wasn't necessarily, well, so it's not wet on wet. I went on dry paper for the vase, where I just kind of outlined with wet paint, and then I took my brush and I wet it and kind of just pulled it up. And then I did drop in some additional once it was wet, but it wasn't, it's kind of a combo type thing. So why did I make this is a good question, because as you can see, I did tape off my paper here, and I didn't need to do that. I mainly did it as a visual reminder for me of kind of how big I wanted this to be, because I wanted to make sure, because we've got, you know, only so much time together. I want to make sure that we're going to paint this a couple different times together, because this is one of those lessons that is so simple, but sometimes it takes a couple tries to get it, and I want you guys to see, like, you know, when we do these live classes, you get to see my failures, you get to see what's going on and all that jazz. And so I just wanted to make sure I was going to keep it a certain size so that I wasn't getting way too ambitious with how big it was, and then one single painting took up the entire class. So that was literally the only reason, was just for me to kind of mentally be like, okay, I'm keeping it right there. And that was that answer. Oh, nice. Welcome, watercolor artist from Nova Scotia. So the colors I used to make the gray were this quinacridone purple, Viridian blue, or Viridian green, and yellow were the 3 colors that I used to make my gray. All right, so now that this is chilled out, this is not entirely dry, but there is no standing water, there's no shine left on the vase. I'm gonna kind of add the sense of place to this. So we are probably gonna get a little bleed, but I have a wet, clean brush, and I'm just gonna kind of touch along there, and it's gonna grab a little bit of that pigment, and I'm just gonna kind of add in that. And even just that little bit of something, it does something to put this in place. One of the things I like to do in the shadows, which is not, it's not necessarily super realistic, it's not necessarily not realistic, but I like to kind of place in some of the colors that we're seeing as if there's like a glow coming from them, because I think it just kind of helps to balance it. So I'm gonna go and do that now. So I'm gonna take a little more water, and I'm going to touch a little more here just to kind of add in some more water. And now I'm going to start to kind of reflect a couple of these colors very lightly. So I'm just going to put a tiny amount of that green in my brush, and I'm just going to touch in a couple places. Maybe a little bit of that pink in a couple areas. And a little bit of that yellow. Just a little bit. And then right along the bottom of that vase, I'm going to take a little bit more of this gray color, lightly, lightly, to create the real shadow of this. And then I'm going to tap my brush off and mess with it a little bit. Now I'm getting a little bit of some interesting drying happening on the vase here because I didn't let this dry completely. And so you might see that happen. That might come in here. If you want to really keep things separated, take the time to actually dry this, and we can keep messing with this a little bit if we want to. I'm going to come in and just kind of soften it back up so that I don't have that so much, but it is going to take away that line. So I might need to actually come back in once this dries and redefine this bottom part if I really want to make sure I know where kind of the pot ends and that table or the space is. You can see I've kind of done that on like this one where I went back in afterwards and just kind of went whoop right there. The other thing we could do if you wanted to add a highlight is you tap your brush off really, really well on this, and then we can kind of lift out a section, or you can even take like a little square of this and we can just pull up to give it a little bit more kind of roundness to this. We want to kind of pull up some there. So I do think I'm going to take a step back from this one, actually let it chill out. It's going to have a moon pie, and we're going to move on to the next one. So yeah, for those of you who are confused about the moon pie thing, there is a sound here on TikTok, and depending on what side of TikTok you're on, you know, you see those things or not. So I'm going to set this to the side. I will need that gray again to do the little boop at the bottom of this in a little bit. But just so that we have a little bit different experience, I'm going to switch over to my, this is my palette of koi watercolors. And koi watercolors always look real interesting after they've kind of dried up, after you've used them for a while. But give them a good spritz, which is going to let them kind of actually reactivate and let us actually get some of this color. And that's wet over there, so I'm probably actually going to mainly be dipping. We kind of mixed up colors here, and on this one, I think I want to try to just dip straight from the palette. It's not a typical way that I work, but let's kind of give it a go and just see what happens, because it can be kind of interesting to experiment with trying a little bit different things so that you can also see kind of what happens in different scenarios, because one of the things I love about art is that we all work a little bit differently. You're going to have slightly different mannerisms when you're placing your brush. You're going to have slightly different mannerisms when you're grabbing colors and just things you like to do. And so if I show you a whole bunch of different ways to do things, it might be difficult for me. It might be something that like really makes sense to your brain and how you want to do things. And that's kind of the whole goal. All right, so we're starting over. If you're just joining, you're in luck because we're doing this several times today. So I'm just going to take a brush, make sure it's nice and kind of cleaned off, or clean-ish at least water. And I'm just going to make sure there's quite a bit of that in my brush. And then I'm going to just kind of go in and just tap around with my brush, putting a little more water in my brush as necessary. And I'm leaving some white space in between areas. And I'm going to show you guys in a second, but I'm kind of trying to make sure that I have a little bit of an irregular shape. And the best way to check where your water is to have it catch the reflection so you can see. You want there to be areas that are not shiny in between because we want some white space preserved, like this. Don't overthink it too much. I know that is probably the hardest part of this. And I'm just gonna dip into whatever color kind of looks fun to me, like this purple color looks fun. So I'm gonna put some of that. I'm just gonna touch that in a couple spots. Let's just do it in 3. Sure, why not? It's gonna move around a little bit more as it sits. This blue is kind of calling my name here, so I'm going to put some of that in my brush. And maybe I'm going to do a lot smaller dots of this. Ooh. Because maybe these are, you know, slightly different shaped flowers. And then I want to balance. I think I want some orange. So let's put some orange in over here. I like koi watercolors, the dried pans, I like them. The one thing I don't love about them is I don't feel like they have a really true pink. This is kind of the closest. Is it this one? Or is it this one? That's the, yeah, it's the other one. But we're gonna use it just because I feel like this could use a little bit of pink. So I'm just gonna pop this in a couple places. Need some a little more interest here, I think. Maybe over here. And we just have kind of a weird little blob. Doesn't look like anything, and that's fine for right now. Totally fine for right now. Okay, so I think somebody says mix it with white, and I think you're referring to the pink. You can, so I want you to notice something. Now, I am not a teacher that tells you do not ever use white with watercolor. There are a lot of teachers that do say that. I don't care. It's your painting. You do you. But as you learn more about watercolor, notice that this one is like the nicest preserved because it's that one and that one. I don't really have I don't use those colors very often. Occasionally I will, especially at the end if I'm like, oh, I need a highlight or something like that. But for the most part I don't, because in watercolor the paper is our white, and so we just want to kind of usually I just try to have different saturations of levels of water versus the color so that we have different saturations so that it will show through. But yeah, it's more of, I like a real pink color. So the pinks that I usually love using are I love that core quinacridone magenta. And then I have a handmade paint that I really like called Neon Flamingo that is bright pink. We might mess with a little bit of that in a little bit. All right, so now here's where the magic is gonna actually start to happen, because you know, we just have our little blob of things, and we're going to add in that greenery again. The greenery is the thing that's going to make or break this and kind of actually create the illusion of these. So I'm just going to, again, I'm trying to not mix colors. I'm trying to just dip straight in so that you can see this as kind of a little technique. And again, I'm going to make one of those little tappy ones where it's like, ooh, oh, there was water up there. I didn't know that. Okay, well, we know now. But maybe there's kind of a big piece of greenery there. Maybe there are actually a couple of them up here just to kind of add a little more interest. And maybe we have a couple that are peeking out. Kind of trying to distribute this carefully through. And then we also want to start to add in some of these little stems. Now, when you're dipping straight into something like this, it's going to be hard for you to know how much is in your brush. And if you have a lot of water in here, it's going to be really hard to get thin line for these stems. So what you actually want to do is either tap off somewhere on your palette or even on your paper towel if you want to get these really thin lines. Because the less that you have in your brush, the easier it's going to be to make little small thin lines. So I'm going to start to kind of, this is where we're starting to actually bring in the narrative. Oops. My brush strokes today are a little bit, I'm going a little crazy with where I'm touching things. So I'm actually going to take my brush and dry it off because I don't want that much green in there. So I'm just going to grab some of that. Things sometimes go a little bit not according to plan, and that's fine. But I'm kind of just trying to add in where some of these stems are. Now you could, if you wanted to, we could stop here and we could actually dry this so that it is dry and we don't have to worry about where we're touching, what we're touching. And if you feel more comfortable, do that. I'm going to continue living on the edge here. And I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab a different green color. Kind of take a little bit off of my brush there. Just because sometimes having a couple different greens in here is going to kind of help to really bring this all together. And we're just kind of, we want to make sure all the stems are kind of leading towards where we're going to be putting this vase. And then let's add in some more of these kind of greenery type things here. So maybe we have some bigger leaves that are popping out over here. Maybe they're even going to kind of be popping out over where the vases. Okay, so that one I would leave just like that. Notice we've done very similar things to the previous one, but we're going to get really different results, and it's also kind of a fun thing because it's like we need to listen to what the painting is telling me. So I can't tell you put something right here. I can't tell you put something right here. Depending on how you tapped your water and then how all the things flowed together, you're going to need to make different choices in your painting, and that's like a really valuable thing to keep in mind. How do you avoid mixing colors on the brush? It's just making sure that you always have water and this paper towel next to you or a rag so you can constantly wash your brush as you need to. Now, I will say, because sometimes when you're painting and you're trying to move fast or you want just like a little more color, but you want some of this, let's say I was like, you know, I really like this green, but I wanted it to be slightly more blue. Sometimes I will put that green in here, and maybe I will actually go touch over here to grab some of this, which is then going to give me some different effects that can actually be really interesting. Like this, I put two different colors down here, and look how neat that looks. Then we're like, oh, but we've ruined this one because I've got green in there. It's not that big of a deal. We just wash our brush off, tap it dry, and then I'm just going to be able to grab it. And it might take you one or two swipes, but it's gone. And now that color is back to that color. Pampas grass. Yeah, I'd have to Google that. Oh, the water cups. So yeah, these are really fun. I don't know if I can really show you the sides of them, but I made these recently. I joined a pottery studio this summer, and so these were something I made, and they're supposed to have little imprints that say clean and dirty, but then I didn't do that. But it's got like a little brush wrist. I'm still kind of working on the design of it, but yeah, kind of fun. Kind of fun. Hi, Andrea. I miss you. Yeah, I've thought about trying to make some ceramics to sell, but like I sent Andrea and I sent Natasha from the Mightier Pencil some of my beginning ones where I was kind of testing some of these things, and like every piece I sent Andrea just shattered in the mail, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to have to ship things. As well as I am still kind of in the stage where my stuff is pretty heavy. I'm still a beginner. I still don't entirely know what I'm doing, you know? Okay, so let's add in a vase on this one. What do we think for the vase color? Do we want to go for another gray, or do we want to go for I don't know, a fun, funky color? Do we want it to have more texture? What shape do we want? Let me know. Pink, ooh. Go funky. Pink, light blue, funky color, white vase. Clear glass, oh goodness. You know, we could actually do clear glass, but that won't be funky. All right, I'm seeing a lot of pink and light blue, so we're gonna attempt something with this one. Is we're gonna try to attempt like really soft stripes in it, just to kind of like have a little difference in something. So what I am actually going to do at this time is, if anybody is sensitive to noise, this is a little announcement for you, because I am going to take a second to at least make sure that the stuff that's down here close to where I'm going to be painting this vase is dry enough for me to actually go close to it, because since I'm going to add additional complications, and since today I'm also just like apparently not being very careful with my brush strokes, I feel like it needs to dry. I'm also going to dry on this one too to make sure I can show you guys the end part of that, because then we're going to move over to a different type of paper and we're going to do it one more time. So if you're sensitive to noise, turn down your volume for about 20 to 30 seconds in 3, 2, and 1. All right, it's not perfectly dry, but it's probably dry enough. There were a bunch of people asking for a mason jar. Mason jars would, I don't think I have the space for a mason jar on this one, just because I painted so close to this down here. But yeah, we're gonna do pink and white just to kind of, I don't know, spice things up a little bit. All right, so, or sorry, not pink and white, pink and blue, my bad. All right, so I'm gonna do this where I'm gonna take my brush, and now I do need to kind of come over here. So this is basically the pink color that is here. See, it's the same color. I'm gonna put a little more water there because I really want to desaturate this color, so the majority of this vase is gonna be kind of this pinkish color. And I'm just going to block this in. We're gonna do this one a little bit more kind of square-esque. So again, I'm gonna start by just kind of blocking in that outline, just to kind of get an idea of the shape I want. And then I'm just going to fill this whole thing in. We're going to come in with the accents in a little bit. And then what we're looking for here, because I'm going to come in with some blue and try to do some soft stripes that lightly disperse through this, but kind of stay where they are. So this is where we want to really kind of watch. So see, it's still pretty shiny. For it to actually kind of stay where I put it, I need this to be have less shine to it. So again, we're in the eating a moon pie phase, and I will answer a couple questions while we're waiting. So somebody says, do watercolor pans go bad? And if so, how do you know? So the answer to that is kind of complicated because it's kind of no, but it's kind of yes. The ways that you would know your watercolors have gone bad is 2 ways. One, if for some reason you had like mold or something on it, that's not good. That's bad. The second is if the colors don't look or perform how you remember them performing. For the most part, watercolors don't go bad. Like, you can use stuff for a really long time. The things that are going to happen to them is they're going to degrade in kind of how pigmented they are, in the color that they are, and they're going to have lighter results. They're also going to just be a little bit different. You're going to know. You're going to be like, that used to be green and it is not now. Actually, Christy the painter, she occasionally paints with like really, really old, or shows really, really old antique watercolor sets that are like 100+ years old, and you can kind of see how the colors are not what they're supposed to be, and that's kind of how you would know. Five-years old, they should be just fine. Like, actually, this set that I bought, this set is at least, I'm pretty sure this set is at least 3 or 4 years old. I do like koi, but it is one that I paint with pretty often, but there are other ones that I typically, well, that's not true. I reach for a lot of different colors, a lot of different types of paint. So, all right. Oh, maybe I might have talked too much. Because we've completely gone through. There's a little bit of shine left, so I gotta work fast. My goal is, this is not completely dry because it hasn't been that long, but I want to make these little like pink, or let's do it with this color, little stripes in this, and I want them to soften slightly on the edges, so that's when I was kind of trying to wait for the perfect time. So I'm just going to take that blue, and I'm just going to make these along here, and I might have waited a little bit too long. You can kind of see it in some areas is bleeding a little bit more than others, but not on the edges. So the edges have started to dry more. So I should not have chit-chatted quite so much, but that's okay. I can come in with my damp brush and just kind of soften along the edges of some of these. I feel like those lines were a little bit too harsh to kind of match with the style above it. So I'm just going to kind of soften along here. All right, I guess that's my vase. It's not my favorite vase, but it is a vase. And then now we need to do the same thing where we're kind of placing it within the space. So I'm going to take my damp brush, and I'm just going to kind of wet along the bottom of this, and I'm not getting as much kind of movement on this one. So I'm actually going to come in. We could do blues, we could mix some different colors together. We could actually come in with a gray, and by that I mean a black color if we want to. I would just really lighten this with a lot of water to create the shadow. I don't usually shadow with black. I usually do it with more like blues and things. So normally I would come in with more something like this. But just to give you guys kind of an idea, just kind of trying to give it some place. And then I'm going to do that same thing where I kind of drop in some of those colors that we do see throughout the painting, just to kind of give it a little feel of like that it's all part of the same, you know, space, as if it were reflecting, even though it's not, but you know what I mean. Maybe you have no idea what I mean. That's also fine. I'm gonna grab a little of that purple, and notice that I'm having a little harder time controlling how much I'm putting down here, and it's because I'm going straight from the pan. You know, we did talk about that I was going to be demonstrating that just so that we could kind of see it, but it is causing me a little bit of trouble. So we're going to put a little more of that gray right along here to really kind of put it in the place. And then I'm actually going to move back to this one, which I thought I was going to like this one better, but now I'm liking this one better. I don't know. And I'm just going to come back in with a little bit of this gray color that we mixed up and kind of re-emphasize the bottom. We could leave it like that, or I can also soften out the edges just a little bit. And there we go. Yeah, see, I like the round vase on that one a lot. Okay, we're gonna do one more together. This one I will probably come back in and again do the shadowing. Now this last one, again, these are all going to turn out so different. This last one, I think I want to use a combination of, I found one of my old, this is my previous version of the Unicorn Food palette, and I found that, so I want to try that, but I also want to maybe mess with some of my handmade colors, just because they're going to have different reactions. The handmade colors typically settle a little bit more. I'm going to set these to the side to dry. We'll kind of do a revisit at the end. The other thing I am going to switch, I'm basically switching every single variable, is I've got some of this. This is cotton paper. So we were just using Canson, which is a cellulose mainly paper. And this one is a cotton paper. So we're going to try to do it on this, and it's going to also be a little bigger. Now, every single one of those variables that I've mentioned, the paint, the paper type, and then even the size of the painting are going to affect the end result, even if I try to replicate everything exactly. Just all of those things do change. I'm not changing the brush or the fact that I'm using water, but other than that, everything else is pretty different. So I'm going to grab in here. I love the combo going on about the different colors to buy. Yeah. All right. So these are some of my handmaids. I guess mainly what I really want is I want some of this. This is my favorite color I make. It's called Neon Flamingo. It is a super duper bright, and I just kind of want a little bit of that. What can you use besides water? It's mainly water. I mean, you can add some additives and things like that to different stuff, but yeah. Water. All right, so the other thing we could try, this is a little risky, so you guys let me know what you think. But instead of doing the brush tapping, I could spritz the paper strategically-esque, where it's going to be, I'm going to have even less control. So like if I'm going to try to make it so that it's a bunch of random droplets, if we were to do this. If you guys are like, no, I don't want to see that, that's fine too. But that is also an option instead of the tapping of the brush. Glitter, yeah, some of the colors I make are metallic and some have glitter and fun things. All right, it sounds like we want the chaos. So I've got my sprayer here. Now off camera, because I can't really do this right here, I'm gonna mess with the nozzle to see, depending on how much I open or close this, what type of a stream I'm gonna get. So I'm just kind of messing with how tight I have that or not. Just apparently spraying my wall, you know, how you do on a Saturday morning, because I want it to kind of be spritzy and kind of not. All right. I'm also going to try to preserve like kind of some down here. So, well, I guess it won't matter. It won't matter. Okay. I'm nervous, obviously, about this. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to, off camera, what you're not seeing is I'm now going to be standing up. I have a light that's over here. And so I'm standing up so that I can angle myself while I'm spraying this, so I have a better idea of what's happening. Okay. Ooh. Okay, it's just mainly spritzed. I need a different approach. Oh, we got a big one. Okay. I'm nervous. There we go. Okay. I'm going to try to leave it like this. We have a lot of random spray, and then we have a couple kind of bigger puddles. And I think that this might be one where I'm going to have to do some additional drying layers, so just so you know. All right, so while this one is still in this state, we're going to start to drop in some of these colors. My main one I wanted from this was this pink, and this is a big 10, so I want to get this out of here. But I'm going to grab some of this pink, and I'm going to put it on the edges of some of those big blobs. Now, handmade watercolors typically, they settle a little bit more, so you're not going to see them go quite as much. There are some actually additives that you can add to them to make them spread a little bit more, but I also kind of like sometimes how these are more kind of granulating. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, now my art rule brain is telling me I need to have odd numbers, so I'm just going to tap there. Then I'm gonna move this. And let's go for kind of more of a red-orange color. Sure, why not? Okay, let's tap over in a couple different areas. We can kind of use our brush shape. Now these are bigger, so it's going to be a little bit different because I have almost more kind of control over what's happening. So I'm gonna kind of, this is kind of the danger of this, is that you can kind of start to over control and overwork this a little bit. Let's take a little bit of this purple. Maybe the purple is meant to kind of be these like little tiny type flowers. I'm just gonna kind of tap in a couple areas as like filler almost. And you can see in some areas it's kind of spreading, in other areas it's not. All right, now we got to come in with some of the yellow. We need a bright color here. I'm going to put it here because it's kind of, I kind of did that in the shape of a flower, so why not? Let's lean into that. And then maybe there's a big spritz of some of these. I'm just tapping. Okay. I don't know. Do we want any other colors of flowers in there? Or do we want to kind of let this chill out for a minute and see what happens? So in some areas I'm hitting dry spots. So for example, over here where you can kind of see the defined brush strokes, I hit dry spots, or even here. And anywhere you can kind of see the edge of it, of the brush, I am, but in other areas you can see it's wet. One more color, you want some blue? All right, let's do some blue. I'm gonna go for this blue because this is my favorite blue. Again, I'm trying to make sure I am leaving some white space so that we can kind of add the narrative, but I'm gonna try to touch in a couple areas where there is some more of that water. Okay, I'm nervous. I don't know why, but I'm nervous. I feel like I need something a little more here, so maybe there is more kind of blue going on right there. Do I need to add some more of the pink to add more kind of bright spots? What do we think? Don't be. I appreciate the support. More flamingo. Oh, hi, Tim. We're getting a mixed bag on adding more of the pink or not. You know what we can do? Here's what we're gonna do is I'm not gonna add it right now, but I wanna show you guys, maybe on this one, we're gonna leave it like this. Here's the plan. Stan. We're gonna leave it like this. But we're gonna come back in and see how, like on this one, I specifically put like, you know, one of those lily pods that hasn't opened up. And I kind of tried to add in some details to kind of add a narrative. So maybe we'll use the pink to add some different kind of more narrative type things to be like, no, this is really the flower. This is really the area I want you to kind of pay attention to. Because we need to kind of come in with the green now. Now, I am nervous to come in with the green because we spritzed the paper, and so there's lots of little tiny parts that are still wet. So I do think I am going to at least partially dry this just to try to get the little tiny areas in between. Otherwise, we're not going to get the kind of nice defined little stems that we try to hint to in the rest of these. So again, if you are sensitive to noise, it's going to be happening. It's not too loud, but if you need to, go ahead and turn down the volume for the next like 20 or 30 seconds in 3, 2, and 1. All right, I still have a couple puddles, and that's fine, but most of the areas in between are going to be, you know, dry-ish. So there's a couple comments. It'd be fun to spritz the paper and then tap the brush so that it just like drops so you have no control. That could be fun. That could also be exposure therapy for perfectionists. Let's see. Real arrangements typically start with the greenery and then add in the flowers. Yeah, greenery makes or breaks a bouquet, in my opinion. And, you know, we're doing it the opposite way here because that's what I want more control over the greenery because I kind of want to be able to balance certain areas, and that's what's going to really help us create the illusion of these things. All right, so we've got a lot of stuff going on here. It doesn't really look like much. I mean, you guys probably are looking at it going, oh, I can kind of see the flowers because we've been going through this. But I'm gonna slow it down a little bit because this one is a little bigger, so it's a little easier for me to explain in a couple areas. So depending on what you've got going on in your painting, I want you to really take a look at it and notice that kind of when I tap my brush over here, this kind of looks like a stalk of some sort of spray of flowers here. So maybe this should all kind of be connected. So maybe there actually needs to be kind of a stem that goes through this one and connects some of those parts. And then I can actually look around because I did the same thing with that in a couple areas. So maybe I can kind of really hint to what's going on here. I can also kind of decide what are going to be kind of separate flowers. So for example, like this blob in itself is probably one. This one is one, and we can kind of make like a little tiny plan going on. These little spritzes could also have some different parts kind of connecting them together, the purple areas. So take a second to actually look at what's happening in your painting. You might have gone in with the intention, and to be honest, I did on these ones, of having these kind of be a spritz or a spray of flowers here. But some of the other areas, I'm just going to kind of go with the flow. So you might have gone in with the intention, you might have not. Either answer is totally fine. I'm going to kind of mix up I'm going to start with kind of a darker green. So I'm going to take some of this. This is like a army green. It's called guacamole in this palette. I'm going to add in some teal just to kind of darken this, add in more green, but also some more blue colors. And that's a good color to start with. It's not super dark. I will probably add in some more. But I feel like this color that I just mixed up here is going to be complementary to the yellow ones. So let's actually kind of come in and let's add in some of these. Here's the internal stem to it. And then maybe we're actually going to kind of connect in a couple areas, these to here. Now we're doing real subtle things, but look at how much even just a couple little strokes like that is going to kind of influence how your brain thinks about that thing. So I'm just kind of bringing that in. And then this one, it looks like it's kind of like maybe it's whoop, kind of, you know, drooping over here. Just kind of adding in a couple little areas to just kind of say like, hey, this is all kind of connected to this one area. like that. Look at how much more, even just, I mean, I made like what, 10, 15 tiny, tiny brush strokes, and this looks so much more like a bouquet of flowers to me already. Maybe just one more here. All right, I'm gonna switch up this green. Actually, I'm gonna bring this down because again, they need to actually go into the bouquet. So make sure that these have the connecting stems to them. And I'm gonna change this green a little bit by adding in more of kind of a blue color to it to make it a little bit deeper. Just a little bit. Like that. I just took two different blues, just kind of mixed it in there. My entire goal isn't necessarily for it to be the perfect green or anything. It's more just to have a deeper, slightly more bluish green than what I had before. Okay, loving the conversation about just setting your work to the side, because 100% like, even when I was painting, when I finished painting this the other day, I absolutely hated this. And like, this is not my favorite thing I've ever painted, but coming back to it, I'm like, I really like that little pod there. I really like how, even though this looks nothing like a sunflower, you can kind of tell it's a sunflower. Like, there were parts that when I came back, I was like, oh, okay, yeah. And a lot of times you're just, you know, you're your worst critic. Actually, even Andrea was talking about this the other day when we were there and I saw her at Bar's End. Oh my God. Can't believe that happened. We had so much fun, but she was looking through some of her old sketchbooks and she was like, I remember when I painted this and I thought it was horrible, and look how cute it is. Okay, sorry, off tangent. I want to start adding in some more of the greenery, and as you know, I like these little kind of like tassel type things, so I'm gonna do that. So this little sprig, just like that. Maybe one more there. Oh yeah. Look, it's got a little sprig of greenery. I feel like there needs to be a little one over here. Just three there. Maybe there's one here. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. It's already looking more. Looks more and more like a bouquet with every one of these little marks. I'm going to start to add in a few more of these stems with this color. Here. Maybe we even have a couple that are kind of hinting towards going down in here a little bit into the, you know, somebody wanted to do like a glass type vase, and basically, I mean, with how simple we're painting this, we're not going to get like realistic glass, but the illusion of having like some transparency. And what we're actually going to do is I'm just going to bring a couple of these down all the way into here in a couple different directions. And we'll paint over this, and because watercolor, you can kind of move it around after it's dryish. We can just go ahead and kind of smudge it a bit. So I'm going to bring in some of that greenery here. All right, I'm going to go even darker, so I'm going to add a little more blue to these, to this blue-green, just kind of changing the colors a little bit. Let's add in a couple more. Ooh, my stomach is grumbling. A couple more little sprigs and things here, and then I'm going to kind of go the opposite way, and let's make a bright green. Maybe not quite that bright. And let's make some kind of longer type leaves. So maybe there's one here. Whoop. Maybe there's one that comes here. There we go. Here. And I'm also going to kind of connect some of these together. Give them a little sense of what they're floating in, you know. Just a couple little, the parts that are catching the light. Maybe there's one more here. Oh, I don't like where I put that one. I guess I need to like lean into that. We'll put a couple more. And one here. All right. I feel like I'm going to start to really mess with this if I continue doing that. So I'm going to bring in a couple more that are just kind of down over here. All right, I actually really like this one so far. And this could actually be cute if you just kind of painted like a little tie or something on here, but we did kind of get the mason jar request. So yes, yeah, check YouTube in a couple days. Also, everyone can thank Monica for being a true superstar, because I always have really good intentions of posting these like right away after we do the lives, and usually Monica has to be like, hey, psst, you haven't posted that one. And so she helps keep me on track. So everyone thank Monica. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of be going for a little bit of a see-through vase. It's glass inspired. And you can kind of see that on like this one, it kind of looks like it's a little see-through because you're starting to get some of those greens and things in there. We've already kind of painted them, and usually glass can reflect, you know, whatever colors are in the room, obviously. But a lot of times the color that it's reflecting is kind of more of a light teal type color. So I'm going to take some of this teal and put this in here, and I'm going to put a lot of water in here because I want this to be really desaturated, lots of water. And let me grab a little tester strip so you guys can actually see the color of this that I'm trying to get. Oh, I'm so glad you got your paints out. There's just a little. So it's not super pigmented. It's pretty light. And we're just going to kind of hint to, you know, where the top of this jar is. So I'm just going to kind of pull this over here, pretending that this is the top part of the jar. This is not going to be a perfect vase or anything, but we're kind of trying to do the mason jar-esque thing here. Because, you know, we're doing loose paintings here. Just bringing it down here. And we're going to do kind of that same thing that we've done before, where we've got a light color, and then we're just going to soften in. And I'm actually going to go across these. And my hope is that they kind of start to get a little fuzzy. So they really kind of look like they're part of this water. I'm going to leave a little area of white space there. And I mean, you could keep it as simple as that. We could come in with some additional, I mean, this is one of those things where, one, painting glass can be really complicated. It's difficult because it's see-through and it refracts the light a lot, especially when you have water in there. So the first thing I did here was just kind of create the shape. The main thing I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of keep this one real simple in this vase because, you know, we don't want this to be like super, not that it would be super realistic because I can't paint super realistic glass, but we don't want this to be so much more detailed than up here because it will kind of really clash with each other. So we want to keep it kind of a similar style where it's just kind of loose and we're just kind of putting colors in here. So the main things we need to do is we need to do a little bit of shadowing, and then we're also going to need to add in the water line in here because otherwise it looks like we didn't put any water with our flowers, and that would make me sad because they would just shrivel. So one of the things that's going to keep this successful is when you leave these kind of accidental but also intentional with glass places where I specifically didn't put paint, they look a little like reflections, you know? All right, I'm gonna take a leap into the wild side of this, and let's kind of try to place this in place. I will have to come back in and, you know, touch up the vase, but just so that we kind of have this going, because I will need to dry this in a second. Oh, Mogi's trying to paint with us today. And so I'm just going to put some water here. I will have to come in and touch this, but I kind of want to start to do that same thing where I'm going to reflect some of those colors in here. So I'm going to take some of my darker blue and just barely touch it to where some of that green is. This is where I'm going to really kind of put some of the shadowing in general where that is. Barely touching, just kind of letting it do its thing. Then we're going to come in and we're going to grab some of that blue that we had in here and see it's kind of there. So I'm just going to kind of, ooh, I got way too much in my brush. So I'm actually going to wash my brush and I'm going to soften there, and then that will actually keep some of that in my brush. So we're just going to place this in a couple places. Let's take a little bit of this pink color. I'm going to make sure I really tap this out because I want this to be kind of subtle, and this is not a subtle color by any stretch of the imagination. For some reason, I just like to kind of reflect some of the colors that are in here. I just think it kind of adds a little bit to this. Let's come in with some of that yellow in a couple places, just a couple little places. And let's do a little of that green too. You know, we're not going for perfection in this. This is meant to be, you know, a really loose painting. We're just kind of trying to give it a sense of place by kind of putting it somewhere so that it doesn't just feel like it's just floating. I mean, there are some, you could do a really neat just kind of floating one as like a painting itself. All right, so again, things are gonna get noisy for just a second because I want to dry this because I want to add the bottom of this vase back in, and I also want to add the water line in so that we, you know that our flowers aren't going to die. So this is going to get noisy for about 20 to 30 seconds in 3, 2, and 1. All right. So we're going to work on our water line and also the shadows. I'm going to start with the water line part first. So we're just going to use more of this color, maybe slightly more saturated with that blue color to kind of hint to where this is. And let's say we bring our water kind of up here. We're just going to go across kind of at a little whoop bit. Hint to it being in the back as well. Like we don't need to do too much to hint to where the water is, but it also isn't going to touch the sides completely because the glass has walls. So maybe you could hint to a couple places there, and also hint to the fact that it kind of sits at the bottom. And then I'm just going to take my brush and wash it, and let's just kind of pull this in a couple places just to give it a little look. You know, I'm not. Again, we're going loose with all of this because it's going to be more complementary to the rest of it. And then let's make kind of a gray color to kind of re-emphasize a couple of the sides of this. So I've got this green here. I could bring it into some of this kind of reddish color, which is going to give me a little more kind of a grayish color with maybe a little of this blue. Or if you've got a black, that's fine too. And I'm going to kind of re-emphasize the bottom of this, and maybe in a couple places I might put a little bit of that to just kind of, I like to just kind of put it throughout in a few places so that it doesn't look like, oh, I just added this random color in this one area. And maybe even hint to the fact that there would be kind of the back side of the vase a little bit. I'm going to go in and soften that in a second. And let's add a little more shadow here. Why not? Why not? Let's soften that because that was not super great. I don't know. I feel like that's all I want to do for the base. because I kind of feel like I'm at that point where I'm going to mess it up more the more I mess with it. And I don't hate it right now. So, okay. So, I don't know. Should we do a little recap? I guess like we could come in and add, what do you guys want? I've got a couple more minutes. My stomach is starting to grumble quite a bit, but I got a couple more minutes. So do you want me to try to add in some more details to part of this? Do you want to do a recap? Do you want me to answer general questions? What do you guys want to know right now? One vote for recap. All right, I think we're getting a couple detail things. So one person said neck. Yeah, you're right. I can see that. Like a little bit here. Even just that little boop there does help. Okay. All right, we're gonna be a little bit careful here, but we're gonna add in a couple little details. So, I feel like we have a couple options here. So I feel like this flower is already kind of defined, so we could kind of lean into that. So I'm going to take some of this with this bright color, but I'm going to put more water on my brush so that even though it's bright, it's a little less saturated. And let's kind of just go for this. So like maybe what we could actually do instead of outlining is we could come in and add in, you know how a lot of times flowers have kind of the little like, I don't know, little like striations like this. So we could come in and actually kind of define where some of the centers are on certain areas like that. Actually, I do think that helped a lot. I mean, we could even come in and add in a couple little lines on some of these if we wanted to define where some of these petals are on this flower. Okay. All right, I don't want to do anything else to that one because I kind of like how that looks. So that's going to kind of be the focal point here. We could try, where else could we add a little bit of a focal point? Kind of balance that. I gotta kind of pick this up and look at it. I don't know, I like it. I am worried at this point that I'm going to mess this up. So maybe what I'm going to actually do is go in and add details on some of the leaves, because this is one of those ones where it's like, I can tell, like I feel like there is something I could do to improve parts of this, but I also feel like I'm like a couple brush strokes away from ruining parts of it. So when I feel like that, that's when I try to not. So I'm actually going to let's add in a little bit of like some depth to some of these, to add in a little bit of, you know, just a little texture to these. So we could do something like that to add into a little more detail. Yeah, okay, so that is one thing that we could do. I was kind of looking at that, and yeah, that could be kind of more like hydrangeas. So I'm going to make a little darker blue. And then we'll go in and just add in a few more details to some of these. Just give them a little more depth or something. Again, I feel like I'm one or two brush strokes away from a disaster. All right, that's all I'm going to do on that right now, because I feel like I'm going to ruin it. All right, so there were some people asking for a recap. I don't think we're going to recap recap the results, and I'll show you a bunch of examples of the paintings. If you want to rewatch the lesson, though, I will be posting this on YouTube after it downloads, as long as it saves on TikTok. And I did film actually a longer format video for YouTube yesterday, where we're going to go over kind of similar concepts too. So there will be a couple different options on how to do this. So here is the last one we did together. This is on Fabriano watercolor paper. It's 100% cotton. I used my old unicorn food set, and then I also used one of my handmade colors called Neon Flamingo, which is like my favorite color. It's weird, I never used to like pink, but once I started painting, pink is my jam now. Somebody says stop. All right, okay, so that's what we did on this one. Then we started by painting this one, which might actually be one of my favorite ones we did. The colors are a little bit muted, more muted than I expected them to be. I was using kind of what was left on my palette here of some of my tube paints where I had this like random limited palette. But I like the composition of this. I love the roundness of this. I also really like that one sprig here and some of that. I kind of like the muted colors. I wish there was a little more kind of red or something, or a little something breaking up maybe this area. Then we moved into Koi, and I like how bright the colors are on this, but I don't like some of the choices I made on this one. But it's still, I mean, it looks like a little bouquet of flowers, especially if you look at it from really far away. The other thing that was different about this one, because the way I demonstrated was, you know, on the top one, I was showing you mixing colors with these. We were messing with how concentrated the colors were. And then this one, we used Koi, but I worked straight from the little pans just to kind of show you a different way of potentially working. And I do tend to not love how my things turn out when I go straight from the pan. It just doesn't usually do it for me, but that's also just how I like to paint. You might find a completely different answer to that, and that's fine. And then we can recap some of the other ones that I showed you at the beginning, because there are a lot of different options to do with these kinds of things. You can go more or less realistic. The other thing you can do is, like, I painted this one last night because I was like, maybe I'll do something like this tomorrow during class too. And until I looked at it, this is actually the same thing you guys were talking about earlier, where like I painted it and I was like, well, that looked kind of dumb. And then now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, it's actually really cute. But like I had lost some of the detail. And so I went back in with a white gel pen and I added some texture. And I do think it really helped things. And then also the time. Let's see. Where I was cleaning the studio, it's looking, yeah, I got at least one part cleaned, although now it's messy because of the class, but that's okay. All right. Yeah, I've got links to YouTube. I'm Rebel Unicorn Crafts everywhere. And then this was our final one that we did together. And then I already have a video in my like floral playlist on TikTok on how I did this one. So if you need like a really quick refresher, we also have that as an option. Taking notes on Craftville tape. That's funny. So yeah, the next things you're going to be seeing from me is I am trying to work on reorganizing my space, so you'll probably be seeing a lot of that from me, but I've got some more of the absolute beginner videos coming up. I actually show you how to use tube paints in the next one, and then I talk about the benefits of tube paints, because I know my first video is very like, don't use tube paints, and that's not really what I'm trying to say. It's just like, I just, you know, I do feel a lot of responsibility when I recommend supplies, and so for me to say, yeah, like tube paints are great, go out and buy them, I've had such inconsistent experiences with more beginner type tube paints that it just, some of them work fine, and you can figure out ways to work with them. I just never feel comfortable telling you to go spend money on something that you might get and is separated or is kind of weird, so I feel safer with you buying, you know, pan paints, and not even just my pan paints. There is differences in how pigmented and how different things work, but I've never had a pan paint separate on me or do something really weird to me. And so I feel like it's at least a safer bet for you guys. So we're going to be talking about that. I will be talking about tape soon. That's also something else I'm going to be talking about. And I will be doing some more sketchbook exercises too. I have one coming up that I'm calling Planetary Plaid. I really appreciate everyone joining me today and painting with me. If you do post on Instagram, please tag me so I can see. I love seeing that. But I hope everybody has a really wonderful day. And again, thank you, Monica, for answering so many questions in the comments. I appreciate that. And I really like that you guys help each other out in the comments. So I will see you guys. I do this every other week. So see you guys in 2 weeks.